Thank you, Mike. It's been a while. I believe that when we were talking last week, trying to get prepared for this, Pharr Bridge, or the city of Pharr, hasn't been out here since 2019, if I'm not mistaken. The last time we were able to give an update on what we're working on at the bridge. I know that Janie's always here to give updates on the economic development status of things. And that we are joined at the hip, but there's a lot of important things, important matters. How are you? Good to see you. That we've been working on developing at the Pharr International Bridge. So with that, good afternoon, buenas tardes. My name is Luis Bazan, Director for the Pharr International Bridge. It's good to see some familiar faces here. I know that I'm thanking some of our sponsors, of course, the Pharr Economic Development Corporation, as you mentioned, but I also want to thank TMAC, University of Texas, UTRGV. Right? Back then it was Pan Am when I was there. And we've been working very closely with our folks here at TMAC, with David, Hector, and Jesse, developing a strategic plan. So what I have here for you guys today is basically where we've been, where we're going, and where we're going, right? You might have seen the news. We've been a lot in the news lately. The last month or so. We try to get out there as much as we can, but it's got to be relevant, right? It's got to be something that we're working towards. It's got to be something that we not just talk about. And as I like to say, at the Pharr International Bridge, we're no longer just imagining things. We're no longer just dreaming of things. We've been talking about projects, major infrastructure projects for the region for several years now. I mean, I've been going on 11 years at the Pharr Bridge, 8.5 of those as director. And there's been so much going on, so it's hard to find a starting point. So we'll get going. Please interrupt me along the way. I'll probably do a little bit of walking around as I like to, but please stop me if there's any questions. But also we'll entertain Q&A at the very end. And again, thank you, Mike, for the opportunity to come out here and talk about Pharr. So what you're going to see in this presentation is something that's going to be recurring is continuous motion, continuous movement. What we do, what we've designed is very deliberate because the message has to be very clear. If we're building bridges, if we're building infrastructure, if we're trying to streamline the process of crossing commercial conveyances from Mexico to the U.S. and back and forth, imports and exports, it's about continuous movement. We're not building bridges, we're not building infrastructure just to park trucks. We're building infrastructure, we're working with our federal partners and state partners to ensure that we continue to move trade and freight forward. This is the location for Pharr. Everybody knows it. Maybe some of you have crossed, maybe not. You're gonna see there's a lot of work that's been going on the Mexico side here in the last year and a half or so. But this is our strategic location. We're located right in the center of it all. If you recall, back in 2012, more or less, that's when the Supervia Mazatlán-Matamoros was finally built out after so many years under Presidente Peña Nieto. And back then, the whole premise of this was that we can get a lot of that produce from the Pacific coast of Mexico, from the Sinaloa area, more importantly, to get to the northeastern part of the United States, where we feed the country through Texas ports instead of going through Arizona. So right now you're going to start seeing some of these data points or some of this information of how we became that #1 produce bridge in the nation by aligning ourselves with this transportation corridor, and also the NAFTA corridor, and there's other corridors that lead to the United States. But for the most part, being centrally located is a key for us because we're able to get all these products to our end consumers. Not only on time, but also, if we're talking about produce as an example, like some of the vegetables we're eating in our salad today, we get them very fresh, in our plates. I'm gonna grab this other mic. So I talked about a strategic approach to things. So last year, must have been March or April of 2023, we started working with our folks at TMAC at the Texas Manufacturers Assistance Center. So now we have a mission and a vision and values, right? So our mission is to provide excellent global trade services. So we're more than just the bridge. That's more of a tagline that we've been using for the last year or so, but we're more than just the bridge, and as I continue to talk, you'll see why. Our vision is that the Pharr International Bridge will be recognized as the state's best-in-class global trade service provider. And at the end of the day, our value proposition is efficiency. It's streamlining. Again, talking about the strategic location. Most of you are familiar with the territory, but this is just some of the key points that we like to elaborate on. We're a key partner for your imports and exports through Mexico, the US, and way beyond, because we're trading not just with Mexico, even though Mexico is our #1 trade partner for in way of imports and value of those imports, we're trading with about 90 different countries. We're a strategic location that brings commercial advantages, such as this intermodal alliance that we have with the Port of Brownsville. I was at the Border Trade Advisory Committee meeting in Houston yesterday, and we got to hear from all the major seaports, including the Port of Brownsville, our very own Port of Brownsville. We also got to hear from the Port of Houston and the Port of Corpus Christi. So we've had an alliance with the Port of Brownsville. Now that they have new leadership, it's time to get back on that and look back at what we've been able to accomplish in the last 8 to 10 years and what we can do to go forward. And that's why we have images of the Port of Brownsville in here. It creates a strategic location because, as an example, the oil and gas industry, the energy sector has been booming for the past several years. It really picked up back in 2017, and it was because of this MOU that we had. So we started crossing more tanker trucks, more LNG, more liquefied natural gas, but also hydrocarbons and things of that nature through this bridge. So those are things, one of the things that I like to say is that even though we're not an intermodal port of entry, because we only cross trucks, by way of these alliances and these MOUs, we become intermodal to some degree or another. And then the competitive benefits and advantages for future opportunities, such as, the nearshoring, friendshoring, ally shoring, whatever we want to call it, right? And there's different mixed feelings about nearshoring, but like I like to say, and based on research and based on talking to companies and based on talking to investors, it's not something that's coming just as naturally as we say it is. The state of Tamaulipas, as an example, we're not even in the running for nearshoring. And we've been talking about this for a while. So what do you have to do in order to attract nearshoring opportunities? You have to have your infrastructure, you have to have your water, your electricity, not just in Mexico, but in the United States. Because even though these companies are targeting certain states in Mexico, you have to have the deliverables on the US side. What I mean by that, the infrastructure, the warehousing, the distribution space, that sort of thing. And that's it said there, we're crossing about 1.2 million trucks a year through this bridge. So these numbers, where do they come from? Every year for the past several years, since 2012 or so, we've been commissioning a study through World City. Our friend over there in Miami, Ken Roberts, he's been publishing this thing for us, not just for us, but for other bridges like Laredo, some airports and seaports and Port Everglades and things of that nature. And that's how we're able to gauge where we stand. If it wasn't for these numbers, if it wasn't for the US Census information and the contributions from the customs brokers that feed this information to the US Census, we would not know where we stand. That's where the numbers come from. So our total imports this is for 2023, and it kind of fluctuates throughout the year. We get this information every 2.5 months or so, and we update it as we see fit. But for the most part, it stays, in and around this area. So you see we had an increase of almost 10% in 2023 when it came to the imports. On the export side, we had an increase of almost 4.5%. So again, what does this mean? We're trading almost $50 billion in trade with Mexico and the rest of the world. Again, going back to what I was talking about, you see a lot of motion, you see a lot of stuff. This is a concept that entails movement. And you see a watch there, a clock. What that means is, what are we working towards? We're working towards reduced wait times. We're working towards allowing conveyances to cross our ports of entry, the Pharr port of entry in this particular matter, to get in there and get out as fast as possible. And that's what we're building for the future. So just trade by value, by product, about 70%. I actually updated these numbers last night. So about 70% is manufactured or finished goods, 20% is considered produce and perishables. A lot of people confuse and say, well, you guys are a produce bridge. Yeah, we have been catering to the produce industry for many years, but as you can see, manufactured goods just have a higher value. So we're going to continue crossing finished goods through Pharr, not just perishables and produce. And then 10% is energy, oil and gas. This is where you highlight, again, the number. It says 46 billion in trade, but it's kind of like the census, there's numbers, there's folks that don't get counted, there's billions of dollars that don't get counted. So we're about $50 billion in trade. Those were 2023 numbers. By now we're at about $50 billion in trade. And as you can see there, month to month, in 2024, we've been growing at an average rate of about 3% per month. Our daily commercial traffic. So when we look at northbound trucks and southbound trucks, there's two different things, right? And we also like to look at what we call a recapture rate. So anything that comes in northbound from Mexico or other parts of the world, we like to recapture that. We want to keep it at 100%. Right now, our recapture rate is slowly climbing upward again. We're at about 97, 98% again. But 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were at about 113%. That means we were crossing more southbound trucks than northbound trucks. So as you can see the numbers there, during peak months, 3,200. During slow months, 2,700. That's all northbound. When it comes to the southbound trucks, about 3,000. And peak months at about 2,500. So all in all, averaging about 5,000 or more conveyances or trucks inbound and outbound every day through the Pharr International Bridge. Again, produce. So 5% yearly average growth in imports of fresh produce from Mexico. That is representative of over 60% of the state's average and over 30% of the nation's average. So again, we like to consider that we're feeding the country. As we know, in the U.S., not everything is readily available. We do highly depend on these fresh products that are being grown in Mexico, and it is our duty and responsibility to go find out what these products are first and foremost, especially now after COVID. During COVID and after COVID, we saw a huge spike in produce because everybody was just more cognizant of eating healthy and trying to get back on track and trying to cook more at home, more fruits and vegetables. So that's when we started seeing the uptick there. But the video there, it's something that we've been working on these marketing videos for a while. Again, continuous motion, continuous improvement, forward going. But you see a lot of these produce, just it's raining produce in Pharr, but it's raining produce everywhere. We just like to consider the fact that we are that #1 trade partner for produce coming in from Mexico. Again, some more of our rankings. #1 border crossing, again for produce. 3rd largest trade hub in Texas-Mexico border. The 7th for total trade amongst other border crossings by value of product. And then the 29th for total amongst all ports of entry, and this includes over 450 airports, seaports, and land ports of entry in the nation. So pretty staggering numbers considering, we might consider ourselves a small bridge. We're going on 30 years. In November, that is our 30th year anniversary. So we'll be 30 years in November. We're very proud of it. We've been growing, but there's more to come. Just some of the top 5 exports, We're looking at gasoline, as I mentioned, liquefied natural gas, pork, motor vehicle parts, and computer chips. Those are our top 5 exports. It's not to say we're not crossing. We're doing a lot of insulated wiring as well. I think going into the future, we're going to be, as we go out there and target more of the suppliers for the automotive industry, if we want to land some nearshoring opportunities, we're going to see these exports shift a little bit, and also on the import side. But you get your total value there of those products. This image here is another one of our videos. We call them teasers. These videos are about a minute, not even a minute in length, and they have a very key message. The key message here is that Mexico, again, is our #1 trade partner, but we're building together. We're manufacturing together. Yes, it's meant to be, a little bit more on the, animation side where this is not the way we cross vehicles, obviously, but what it's meant to show is, again, continuous movement, continuous improvement, but that we're building together with Mexico. We're tied at the hip with Mexico. We're constructing. Janie mentioned the Industrial Warehouse Summit. That's something we're really looking forward to. Our next session, that's going to be part 4 of the series coming in October. And What we would like to highlight there, again, is the need for industrial warehouse space and distribution on the US side, because the manufacturers are in Mexico. Again, if we want to target nearshoring, we have to have all those elements in place, lined up and aligned in order for it to work. But more importantly, the fact that we will continue to be Mexico's #1 trade partner and vice versa, and we have to continue building together. Our top 5 imports: TVs, computer monitors, avocados. We're huge during Super Bowl season. That continues to be a thing, and we're going to continue because now the state of Jalisco is also starting to import avocados. There's been some issues. We're not going to get into it, but there's been issues in those states. There's a lot of things that we can't control, but at the end of the day, by providing the services, by providing the infrastructure, we can ensure that you're going to get your fresh avocados for your guacamole, for your carnes asadas, or during Super Bowl. Insulated wire and cable, medical instruments, that's been growing since 2017 more or less, but it really spiked during COVID as well. And then berries. So berries are, we cross all kinds of berries: strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, whatever berry you can think of, we're crossing them through this bridge. So again, what are we doing, and what are we doing to get us there, to the future? If we want to continue to attract this trade, we want to continue to retain these numbers, retain the types of products and commodities that are crossing, you have to have skin in the game. You have to have projects. I just came back from a meeting right now with the folks from CBP in Washington. The program, the Donations Acceptance Program, or DAP, as we like to call it, they've been at it since 2014. And they asked me to speak there real quick for about 5 minutes or so before I came over here, because we were on a call last week, a Teams meeting with other cities, with other ports that are either starting the process of submitting a project that they want to get going. They want to get off the ground. They want to get constructed to streamline their processes at their ports of entry. But it's got to be done through a public-private partnership. In this case, it's basically public-public, because we're a city, we're a government, a local government entity. But we've partnered up with CBP under the Donations Acceptance Program, the DAP program. So it was just to tell our story and how did we get there. And I told them, the first thing you have to do is know who your key impact partners are. And to us, the key impact partners are CBP, because they operate the port. Even though GSA owns the facilities, even though GSA sets up more ground rules and more regulations and more obstacles, CBP are our #1 partners there, because they want to see these projects get off the ground. So even before my time at the bridge, there was already talks about certain projects. And how are we going to get there? It wasn't until the introduction of the Donations Acceptance Program, which landed on my lap back in 2014, submitted our first set of projects, and landed our first MOU with GSA and with CBP to create these projects. So this project, we just did the groundbreaking for this on the 29th of July. We will not be open or fully operational until TxDOT finishes their portion of the project, which back then they said it was going to be till December of this year, but just last week they announced that it's going to be in September. So we're happy to announce that we're finally going to be able to open up these 2 additional primary commercial entry lanes that you see at the bottom there. Those are the primaries. Every commercial conveyance that comes through the Pharr Bridge needs to go through the primaries first. Unless you're an oversized, over dimensions, there's a separate lane for that we've built out, which you'll see right here. That's for those big Tonka Caterpillar trucks that we're currently crossing through our southbound facilities. George.
The hang up there was staffing. Is that what typically
allows you
to open it for
TxDOT?
For CBP or?
So the hang up for the whole thing, for the project? No, because when we first started, when we first introduced this project, when we first finally proposed it, before it got accepted, and before we signed the MOU, the whole premise of it is you're supposed to have enough staffing.
Okay.
You're supposed to have enough staffing in order to have these projects, because what happens? You have different bridges. Perfect example is here in the valley. You have X amount of officers that are actually qualified to be officers, CBP officers. Now, mind you, CBP officers take about 17 months to complete their training, to complete their certification, to get through the process. Then they have to go do mentorships. They have to work at a port to get the experience. But when you don't have enough officers, and CBP has been in a deficit of officers of over 1,000 across the country, not just in the southern border, but also the northern border, for many years now. We've heard our legislators talk about it. We've heard the trade talk about it. We've heard our partners. We've heard everybody talking about it. And to this day, we cannot get a lot of these officers trained fast enough. So what happens when you have other ports of entry? You basically spread yourself thinner. You spread yourself so thin that you're really not causing any positive effect on trade. All you're doing is taking officers from here, putting them over here, and it becomes the same thing. So our challenge has been from the get-go to ensure that we have the right amount of officers, and from the get-go, we would not have been able to get this program off the ground or this project off the ground if CBP wouldn't have said that they had enough officers. So for now, in Pharr, it looks like we have the amount of officers that we need to cover the new operations. But basically, that's what this consists of. Again, 2 entry primary lanes, 2 commercial exit lanes. So now we have 4. We had 2 commercial exit lanes here. We've had them there since day one, since 1994. But now we have 2 commercial exit lanes here. What does that mean? So that means that basically anything that's certified, any certified conveyance under the CTPAT program, is going to be able to utilize a fast lane once we build out the bridge in order to bypass the entire, or circumvent, if they say bypass is a bad word, circumvent the entire import lot and be able to go gate to gate into the border safety inspection facility. That is the TxDOT facility that I was talking about. That is we're waiting on TxDOT to open up that facility in late September to become fully operational and start taking advantage of that. So what does that do? That gives us about 25% more added capacity inside the import lot for those conveyances that do need to be seen by CBP. Why? Because there really is no value right now. There really is no benefit, no advantage when it comes to the CTPAT program. Once we get all these projects aligned, once we get all these projects open, our goal is to get us from we're at about 30% of our companies, of our customers are certified. In the next 5 years, we want to get to 60%. And that's something we're working through our strategic plan as well. So again, at the end of the day, the goal is to reduce wait times. We don't want trucks stalling like the way you see here in that picture. We cannot have that. No port of entry can have that. Again, continuous motion, continuous improvement, forward motion. That is the whole goal of our projects. And that's why, again, our value proposition is efficiency. And then we get to our DAP 16. So I didn't say why DAP 15. So 15, because that's when the MOU was signed in 2015, fiscal year 2015. That's a long time, and with this program, one of the things we were talking about earlier is how do we streamline that program too? Because if CBP created the program, federal government created the program so that cities like Pharr and other cities, neighboring cities, can join in and be a part of this program. If they're all about efficiency and streamlining and safety and security, then why is the program, so slow to get us to that finish line? It took us 5 years from when we started planning the DAP 15 project to finally break ground in 2020. During COVID, we broke ground on that project, and as I mentioned, we just did our ribbon cutting, a few weeks ago at the end of July. So that's how long these projects take. So the DAP 16 project is an expansion of the dock. If we go back real quick, I'm not gonna go back because it might throw things off a little bit, but this is the import lot that I kept pointing to earlier. The import lot, we're gonna build that out. We're gonna expand on that. It's 3 components, it's 3 separate projects tied into one. This project is being let here in September, and we can start construction in October. Now, we fell behind on this because it was gonna go hand in hand with another project, but we needed to rebid the project, and I do have some technical notes. I can get into the technical stuff later if it's needed, but I think this is just an overall. But we had to relet the project because there was not enough bidders out there. Nobody was qualified for this project. And these projects take a lot of work and a lot of commitment, and we want to get them done on time. DAP 15 took about an extra year. We can't afford to do that either, because if we're claiming we're going to get there fast, we got to get the right company to build it out to make sure that it happens so we can get there on time. But what this calls for is basically, again, an expansion of the dry dock right here, an expansion of the cold inspection facility, not a cold storage. Even though I know even CBP calls it a cold storage, we don't like to call it a cold storage because we're not storing anything inside the port. We want to get, we want to ensure that we get everything crossing, with enough time. And then the one at the top there, the one right here, that's a regional ag laboratory and training center. So for the longest time, let's say shipment of broccoli comes through, and the shipment of broccoli has a speck of a bug, a pest. That pest, if it's not identified by CDP, by the CDP ag partners, that's considered, if it's identified, that means it's non-actionable. That means that the product can cross and can get through, no problem. They have cargo release authority. If it's actionable, that means that they don't have it in their books. It's not identifiable. They can't identify it. So what do they have to do? They would have to send that specimen to a neighboring bridge in Cameron County. It's got a little bit more bells and whistles than what we have here as far as our laboratory is concerned. And if they're not able to identify it there, it goes to DC, to USDA. And then what happens? That broccoli never made it across. That broccoli never made it to your salads or to the dinner table. And it's a waste for the company, but it's also a waste for us because that, to me, I see that as we're not doing our job. We're not pushing freight forward. We're not pushing our products forward. So that's what this is for. But it's going to be regional because it's not just going to be for CDP ag specialists. It's for USDA specialists as well. In order to have that cargo release authority that we need to push the product out, particularly to not break the cold chain, also to ensure that it's an extended shelf life for these products, right? So that we can get them at our dinner table fresh. And then again, let me just kind of share some stats on this real quick because that is going to be important to share. And the only reason why I don't have this presentation, I was telling Mike, this presentation particularly up there because it's brand new. We're going to be presenting this next week in Mexico City at the Binational Bridges and Borders Crossings Group meeting. That's a delegation, federal delegation, Mexico-US binational, that allows you to either stall your project or keep going forward with your project. Fortunately for us, we're at that junction where we just keep going. We're just updating them. But I think it's important to see the amount of square footage that we're going to be getting. So you look at the bottom portion there, this portion, the dry dock for finished goods, for manufactured goods, if they do need to be inspected, if they're not certified, or they're red flag because the CBP system known as ACE, the Automated Commercial Environment, is not working. So that dock, it's the dry dock, that's about 32,257 square feet. That's 11 dry docks. The next one, the one with the refrigerators on top, that's the cold inspection facility. Again, not as cold storage, a cold inspection facility. That's 23,491 square feet. That's an additional 13 cold docks. And all this is enclosed. Again, we're trying not to break the cold chain. And then the agriculture laboratory, you're looking at about 10,365 square feet of that. So altogether, you're looking at almost 70,000 square feet of space. This project, again, will break ground. We just broke ground on it, actually, along with the bridge expansion on August the 14th. But we haven't started moving dirt because when you use federal funding, that's another thing. There's a whole level of requirements, a whole set of requirements, especially if it's administered by the state. And that says that TxDOT has to concur with the contractor you chose or the contractor you awarded the bid to. So we're going to start in October. This is not going to be finished until November, December 2026. It's quite a ways away, but that's just the way these projects go. If we would have started earlier, if we would have gone with the first bid and it would have been a competitive bid, then we would have started construction already. But we're here now. We've been waiting long enough for these other projects, but this is just to say that we are still moving forward again. Forward movement, continuous improvement. And this is all to increase, there's a key word right here, truck throughput. So CBP likes to use the word truck throughput. So we started using that too. Again, it's allowing these trucks to queue, get off the bridge, queue up, but get out. Move in, move out. It's about releasing enough trucks during the day instead of stalling trucks during the day. They just have a different way of saying it, but that's a key word that we've been using for a while because that's, again, it's all about efficiency, right? And this one is DAP 16 because that's when we signed the agreement with GSA and CBP back in 2016. And then the highly coveted, highly anticipated project that we've been talking about for years. This project, the bridge expansion project, the second span of the bridge that we've been talking about for a while, should have been done 5 years after the Pharr International Bridge was constructed. But there was setbacks back then. Maybe the leadership wasn't the right leadership. There was no push for this. When Dr. Ambrosio Hernandez came on board as our mayor back in 2015, we started talking about this. It was back on the table. And the question was, are we ready for this? Do we need it? Is CBP on the same, is the US, is Mexico, where are we on this? So we started doing our legwork. We went to DC, US Department of State, and we sat down with them and said, well, we're good, but where's Mexico? So then we had to trek back to Mexico and go meet with our federal partners over there. Luckily, we have a liaison that works in Mexico, that used to work for the government, so we were able to line ourselves up with the key people in all these agencies in order to start talking about this project. And Mexico said, well, we gotta look at it. So eventually, we're here. Eventually, we got on the same page. Eventually, we decided that it was something that was needed. And then this was back in 2018, 2019, the aduana in Reynosa, that obviously connects to our bridge, had just put about $90 million of infrastructure. They had modernized the entire aduana. And they did it in record-breaking time. They did it from March 2017 to October 2018. And they were basically able to reimagine the entire aduana. So now you went from, almost quadrupling the size within the same footprint. It was just reorganized. It was just done differently. So we said, okay, so Mexico's doing something right. So that's why they were on the same page with us. But then it was time to, again, get back to the US and say, what do we need? We were able to get our consultants on board. We were able to get our engineers on board, and we started the process. The painstaking process, because at that time, we were thinking we still had to go through the US Department of State to get things done like in the past. Now, mind you, we had our presidential permit since 1978, but we didn't build the bridge until 1994, along with the first original NAFTA agreement, the first agreement. But it wasn't until then that we started looking around, and we noticed that in Kansas City Southern, the rail company, they had gotten their presidential permit in the summer of 2020 during COVID, without any plans, without an environmental clearance, without a lot of things. And we said, well, they must have done something right. How do you get a presidential permit? So we started doing more research. And then we found out that at that time, there was an executive order on behalf of the president stating, no longer do you have to go through US Department of State. Everything comes through me. Everything comes through the White House. So we took advantage of that. I brought it up to the engineers. We had a discussion about it and said, well, what do we have to do? Well, we have to actually put the plan in motion. Let's write out the plan. What is the proposal? So we worked on it for about 2-3 months. We submitted the plan, the proposal for our presidential permit amendment. Mind you, we already had our presidential permit. We submitted it in October. December 31st, 2020, we get the call that it was approved. So 3 months. 3 months, it took us record-breaking time. That could have taken us 4 to 5 years just to get us to that point. It took us 3 months to get us to that point. So again, because we took advantage. You look at our friends in Laredo, they're struggling right now because they did not take advantage of that, and they're still seeking. I think they did some lobbying through Ted Cruz and some other legislators, and they were finally given that green light just recently. It came out in the news. Them, Eagle Pass, and some of those other bridges that finally are getting their presidential permit. So we were very lucky, but it's also teamwork. We have a great team, not just within the bridge, but also at the city, that allows us to get through these obstacles to get things done on time. So with this, what are we gonna get? 4 additional lanes of traffic. That's basically 100% added capacity. We're building a twin bridge. What you see right now, you're getting an exact replica of it, but shinier and newer, right? The intelligent traffic system, this is something we've been asking for a while. This basically allows trucks to line up into the different lanes where they're supposed to go, because it's gonna depend on the peak seasons and things of that nature, but we'll be able to divide trucks up through all the lanes, because we're gonna have 8 lanes now. And then we're gonna have 2 crossovers, one on the US side, one on the Mexico side, in order to move trucks and have more flexible routes. Not flexible routes, but just more flexibility in the transportation of these conveyances. So again, what are we looking at? Increased capacity and efficiency. And this should be, this is then the final slide. This is basically the project in Mexico. So Mexico broke ground on this project in March of 2023. They started working precasting beams in April of 2023. And as you can see, they're way ahead of schedule. As a matter of fact, they were gonna finish this project at the end of this year, November, December of this year calendar. But they just announced 2 weeks ago at our groundbreaking for our side of the bridge expansion that they're gonna be done by September. So to us, that's great news. It lines things up for us, but it also allows us to also, step on it. You know how they say, you gotta, como dice Bert Ogden, dale gas. We gotta get going, and we gotta get this project going as fast as possible, because our customers have been asking for this for many years. As we make our way through the maquiladoras and the manufacturers and visit with them in Mexico, one of the key things that they're asking for is this bridge expansion, because it's gonna make their life, their operations, their efficiencies a lot better. So that's why I have this highlight there, just so you can see the construction and the progress. And then the last one is one of our teasers for the bridge expansion. And this is something we've been using. So we're members of many different associations. We're members at the local level, regional level, and more importantly now, the last few years, the national level, particularly in Mexico. One of the associations that we're members of is CAREM. CAREM is basically the National Customs Brokers Association of Mexico. It consists of almost 1,000 members. And we've been sponsoring that event since 2017, 2008. We've been going to that event. And we were able to highlight this for them because, again, these are the decision makers. These are the folks that are going to determine where their customers go through. So to us, it's important to highlight the importance of having 2 bridges. So that's why when we say more than just a bridge, it's meant in a literal way. It's literally, we're building 2 bridges. We're going to have another bridge. But also, as Janie said earlier, we're doing all these programs. We have the Industrial Warehouse Summit. We have Bridge Connect on a monthly basis. We have the Truck Expo that's coming up at the end of September. We're just doing a lot of these value-added programs for the trade community so they can benefit from it in the end. So that's our bridge expansion. Again, we broke ground on the 14th of August, but we actually started moving dirt on August the 5th. This project will finish in the set date is November 24th of 2025. So it's not that far away. We're really looking forward to it. We appreciate the time again, Mike. We appreciate your time for attending, and thank you for listening to us. That's all I got.
Thanks, Luis. A lot of amazing stuff going on there.